Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today, ladies and gentlemen, to give you this presentation on the economics of land degradation and the cost of action versus inaction. This is based on joint work by the Center for Development Research of the University of Bonn and the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington. We had two phases to our ELD project, one over 2010-2011. I will present a little bit the results from the report there. And the second phase started last year and will extend through to the end of next year. So this is the main output of the first phase, which where the results and recommendations were compiled into a book. There's a condensed version of that book also that was prepared as an issue paper for discussion at the first Global Soil Week last year in Berlin, and I have put here on the slide the link to that to an updated version of this issue paper. The book and the report highlights the huge variations in the results of the different biophysical and economic assessments of land degradation, which lead to low comparability between the different studies. This points to a need for a consistent and rigorous framework to develop a body of case studies whose added value, collective value, will exceed the individual values and leads to a true global assessment of economics of land degradation. Some of the issues we were very pleased to see were also mentioned yesterday in the presentation of the white paper number 1 for this present conference. Let me show you some of the analytical results that we put forth in the first phase report, although that report was mostly a review of the state of the art. We did some analytical analysis, we had some analytical results as well. So here are results showing the correlation between poverty, here approximated by infant mortality rates, and land degradation approximated here by an index of vegetation cover. What I want to draw your attention to on this map is basically the plurality of the relationships between poverty and land degradation. And in particular, two interesting cases, the dark green areas and the dark red areas. The dark green areas are, I would say, the good news stories, where despite high incidences of poverty, we had over a 20-year period an increase in vegetation cover. The dark red areas, on the opposite, are the areas where we could argue for urgent action, where high poverty incidence is related or correlated with a decrease in vegetation cover. We are aware, and we were made aware by our national science colleagues, with the issues associated with using data based on vegetation cover index, NDVI, as used, for instance, in the LADA and GLADA work. And in our second phase of the project, in our new work, we try to address some of these issues, for instance, by correcting NDVI data for atmospheric fertilization. But there are other issues associated with these indexes, and some of them were discussed in the previous session here this morning. So we have good news stories, we have bad news stories, and I guess what we should take from this is that indeed it's not all doom and gloom, and we have several instances where we can observe a negative relationship between land degradation and population pressure. This can lead us to think that hopefully increasing world population is not necessarily, does not have to be related with an increase in land degradation, provided that the right incentives and institutions are in place. Indeed, the relationship between change in vegetation cover and change in government effectiveness, as depicted by this map, suggests that good governance has a very positive impact on land degradation outcomes. I turn now to the second phase of the project, started last year, going through to next year, and hopefully extended thereafter. The aim of this second phase is for ZEF and IFPRI to engage in scientific partnerships with other research groups in an open partnership in order to operationalize the methodology outlined in the book and document that was the product of the first phase. We have, to that end, now written what we call a methods paper, which is for discussion here at this conference and is available at the desk of the ELD initiative in the foyer. I also put here the web link to this specific publication. And we would very much welcome discussion on the proposed methods. Under the second phase, we will work on a number of selected case studies and applying standard methodology, which we hope will in the end form a template for future ELD assessments. In terms of methodology, the sampling framework for the case studies is crucial. We need to take into account the very wide heterogeneity of land degradation, socioeconomic and institutional contexts. Random probability sampling for case studies is really not the appropriate method here. So we try to systematize our case study selection, and we adopted a three-steps approach where we clustered countries based on key socioeconomic and institutional underlying factors of land degradation as identified in our first phase report. Secondly, we validated these clusters using additional socioeconomic and biophysical variables. And finally, we selected the countries based on the clusters, but also on other factors such as regional representativeness and data availability. So here are the results of the clustering and validation analysis. This is not so nice to look at, so I'll go straight away to a more visually pleasing representation of the results, and that is this map here. So we came up with 7 clusters, which we have chosen for now not to name, so they are just numbered here. We don't want at this stage to have an etiquette that is, or a label that is attached to the different groups. I think we need to do a bit more thinking to do that. So these are the main clusters, the 7 clusters from which we will draw our case studies. In terms of the empirical research framework, we will organize our work along 3 methodological axes. First of all, a set of core ELD research methods whose aim is to be applied to uniformly across the case studies and to fulfill the requirements for globally comparable and rigorous ELD assessment. We have a second group of approaches which we will endeavor to apply as uniformly as possible across the case studies, and whose aim is basically to test the robustness of the results obtained with core research methods. And finally, we have another set of methods which are a bit more sophisticated and will aim to build and expand on the cutting edge of interdisciplinary land degradation research. Some of those will be presented by my colleagues later. So here are some of the examples of different methodologies under the 3 categories. I won't take you through it all. It's all written in the methods paper and open for discussion. Briefly mentioning the core methods, there are 2 pillars there: econometric analysis of the drivers of land degradation, and the second pillar is the bioeconomic modeling of action versus inaction against land degradation. It is very important in this work, in these case studies, that we identify a set of key variables and data sets that are required to perform this core approach and the core methods to the different case studies. This will ensure that we have a standard for ELD assessments across the different case studies and ensure their comparability and the fact that they will add up to a more important work than the single case studies. There are too many variables to discuss here. I again won't take you through the whole table. The purpose is that we show you that we have a standard to apply to the different case studies, and we would like to discuss that standard with you. So I want to go through the whole table, and I will leave more time for my colleagues who have more interesting research results to talk about rather than the overall concepts that we apply to our project. And I thank you very much for your attention. As I mentioned, we welcome discussion on our methods paper, and we welcome also contacts with interested researchers who would like to perform case studies under our program. Thank you.